My name's Paul Marsh, and today I'll be talking about another tip about how to diagnose issues with the bot framework. And again, I'm going to take the view that perhaps you don't know an awful lot about the bot framework or development as a whole. So I just want to take you through how I discovered this. So first things first, let's have a look where we are. So let's just bring the bot up. So here we are back in the bot as we kind of known before. And we'll just run this up. Let's get everything running. And for those of you who've been following the previous tips and lessons, just to say that I have moved to the new version of the bot framework 4.3, and I've also moved to .NET Core 2.2, so you might see some subtle changes in the code. So let's just open the bot. Just check down here. Looks like everything is running. It is. So what do you think about the health service? Let's just check that Mrs. May is still operating, just about. Shall I expand on that? No. Right. Okay. So the bot looks like it's running. Now, the issue that I hit recently is I was getting some errors in the log files, and I could see that they were coming from somewhere within the bot framework itself, and I was just getting a return exception. So there's nothing I could do to add any additional logging. I didn't really know what URL the bot was trying to talk to or exactly what the situation was. So I wanted to delve a bit deeper to try and figure out how to diagnose the problem. So how do you do that? So the first thing you want to do is you can go off to GitHub and go to the actual bot framework, bot builder itself. So here was Microsoft.bot.builder.azure, and I've got the whole framework here. So you can just go and get that. You can pull that down. I'm currently running off the master. And then you can search in this. So you can have a look about how the whole thing works. This is the real guts of how the bot framework works. So in my case, the error message was coming from this method here, reply to activity with HTTP messages async. So I had a little look in here, and as we can see, we have this should trace in here, so that kind of made me think, oh, this looks interesting. And this adds additional tracing information, so that looks quite good. And when I come down here, read a little bit more about it, lots of these should traces, logging lots of sort of interesting details about the request. So this is all looking really good. And then also, this was the error part where I was getting an error message, so it's not a good HTTP status. It was coming in here. It was reading some details about it and then erroring. But this thing traces the details, but it's not necessarily going to give me all the nuance trace details when it raises the exception. So I'd quite like to get hold of this trace information. So how do you do that? So it turns out that this service client tracing thing is a sort of global setting that you can utilize yourself. I'll show you what I mean by that. So if we grab hold of this and move it into our project. So we come into, this is Maybot here. And what I want to do is I want to switch it on. So we're in this startup here, and I just want to say, we haven't got this reference, so let's go grab a reference to that first. So we want to enable it. Is enabled equals true. So that means that although I've enabled it in our code, the bot framework is now going to start using that is enabled, and it will start generating its own trace information, which we can then use. So how do we use it? That's another interesting point. So let's grab hold of that. And what you want to do is you want to add a tracing interceptor. So this requires an ServiceClientTracing interceptor. Now, I'm going to create one of those, but to save time, and this is a little bit of achievement. I don't normally do this. If you follow me normally, I usually type everything in by hand, but frankly, I haven't the time today, so I'll just quickly get this class out. So we're going to create this class. I'm going to call it that, debug service listener. And then I'm going to quickly steal the whole of this pre-canned bit of class, which is really naughty of me. I know, I apologize. So we come in here. Let's just add this logger that we normally use in our bot. Add a reference to the rest. So all this is going to do is implement what's inside this interface. So there's a load of methods here: information, receive, send, trace error, all good stuff. And all I'm going to do is create a constructor. We're going to pass in the logger. And then when these events are called, information, we're just going to log trace to all of these things. Oops, I haven't got one of these. Let's add that. So when the bot receives a response, it's going to trace in here. When it sends a request, it's going to come in here and trace it. And we're going to send all this lovely information in here. And we're going to get a lot more detail about what exactly is happening inside the framework. So let's go back to our startup. Now we've got that. We want to add our new, just call it a new debug service listener. And it wants to pass in the logger. So we've just got a logger there. That's fine. We just created the Maybot logger. So let's just run this up. Actually, what I'll do is quickly put a breakpoint in just to show you what's going on. So we've got some send request. Let's just put it in send request. So we can run that back up again. What do you think about the health service? So our trace is now firing. So we've got a HTTP message request. So this is really kind of low-level stuff now. So we can see the URI that it's hitting here, the full URI after Lewis. You can see that request. So now we're into the real kind of guts and bones of what's going on with the bot framework. So we can diagnose any potential issues with a bit more fidelity than we had before. So I'm just going to run that off. Oops, got some things running here. So that's great. So we've seen that that message has gone off, and we can get some more interesting information. Of course, if we wanted just to stick that into the console, where we could have a choice, so we could just do that by setting the trace information, or we can add our own details in here. So for example, we could just take this string and just do diagnostics debug, right line. If we didn't want to, we can add trace listeners to the logger and do this kind of thing as well. But as I say, I'm in a bit of a rush today, so I'm just going to rush this one off. There we go. So that's our send request. Should we do one for receive response as well? Let's just put that one in there. I think it's probably the same string. Yep, it is. So let's just run that through again. So I can say, you don't want me to expand on that? I'll say yes. Oh, that's wrong. Oh, never mind. We come back into here. What we do get though is all this lovely information. So as you can see, we're getting lots of diagnostic details coming out. We can see the request that was made, the URL it's made on, all the body of the text, which you kind of get in the emulator anyway. But you can see it now at that kind of lower level again, at this sort of HTTP level. So that's all great. But as I said before, you can probably do this when you're debugging locally, or you could use some network sniffer like Fiddler or something to do this. But where this becomes really interesting is the fact that the bot framework itself is the thing that's creating these messages, poking these messages out. So we're in at a lower level. And what's better than, or another advantage over using something like Fiddler, is that you can now deploy this to the server, and this will all be tracing out to the standard server traces. So you don't need to try and put network sniffers on the servers and things like that, which is incredibly complicated. So hopefully you'll find this useful. Again, sorry it's quite brief, in a bit of a rush, but hopefully, again, as I say, you find it useful, and thanks for listening.